Hi everyone, welcome to Mega's Creations. Janet here, and today we're on a very important mission titled Help Janet Pick a Binding Method. In my last video, I shared that my next travel journal series will document my 2024 trip to Europe. And now listen, I'm so excited to dive in and start crafting, but I'm really stuck on what type of journal and binding I want to do. However, that's where you, my amazing crafty community, come in. I know there is a wealth of knowledge out there, and I thought what I could do is talk through all the binding methods I've tried or considered and share what I do and don't like about each one. My hope is that by the end of this video, you'll have some suggestions or tips that could help me land on the perfect structure for this journal. So fingers crossed we can meet that conclusion, and I'm so excited. So thank you all for sticking around. Like, comment, and subscribe, and let's just jump straight into it. Okay, let's start with one of the most traditional binding methods in the junk journaling world, which is sewn-in signatures. This method involves grouping pages into folded sections called signatures and then sewing these directly into a spine, like this. So these will go here and they will sit in there. And I know that this is a classic junk journal approach, and it gives the journal a really polished book-like feel, and it just looks and feels durable. So I love that. However, one shortfall. I don't feel as though this method aligns with my creative process. For me, using signatures feels limiting because it feels like I'm locked into a predetermined page order, whereas I personally like to treat each spread as its own story. I'm also super particular about what pages I want to sit next to each other. For instance, whilst this makes sense, and whilst this makes sense, chronologically, we've got page 466 here and 467 there. That makes sense. However, what if I want to put this page in? So now this no longer makes sense. Like that spread is not, like I don't get to pick what two pages lie together. So if I'm inspired by a certain background for a spread, but the signature is folded and the pages don't align side by side, it doesn't give me the flexibility I need. I personally like to do single spreads like this, right? So these are two single pages, so I can determine what I want to put next to this one. Whilst this is a full page spread, if, for instance, I don't know, let's say I wanted this next to it, to have Athens and then Mykonos, these are single pages, and I like that flexibility. So let's move on to the next option. Okay, so now that we've established I prefer working with single sheets, the next method I've considered is hinging these two together. Now I could use washi, masking, clear tape, or even paper down the center, essentially creating my own signatures, which I could then sew into the spine. And I think this approach allows for the flexibility that I'm hoping for, whereas I can do each spread individually and then assemble them later. However, does that mean I then have to sew each signature into the spine individually? And also, whilst it is convenient, I'm unsure how it will kind of hold up over time, especially for the chunky interactive journal I intend this one to be. I'm worried if the tape or paper might start to weaken over time, especially if each page is constructed in this manner. Or if not every, most. Will the paper or tape start to peel up over time? I don't know. I've actually never tried this method before. So if any of you have, I'd love to know how it held up, what tape you would suggest I use, and also if I would have to do each signature separately into the book, because that, whilst not impossible, sounds a little bit like a nightmare if I do say so myself. So let's see what other options we may have to consider. Another option is using a pre-existing notebook. This I feel like is tempting for all the wrong reasons. For instance, I like the idea of this because it's already bound and good to go. So starting feels a lot less intimidating. I can just start. It also gives me the flexibility I want because each page is a blank canvas and I can choose and design the layout individually, which I do absolutely love. If, for instance, it was just a thematic journal or one that I was just using to create and order didn't matter, then I would be so much more, what's the word? I'd be so much more willing to just jump in and use this method, right? However, for a travel journal, because these pages are already fixed and I can't move them around later, it feels limiting, right? So with a travel journal, I find that I want the story to be told from start to finish. However, I don't want to create from start to finish. I guess that I could definitely map out the different locations in advance, but that's hard because Pompeii, for instance, was technically a one-day trip. In theory, it could be multiple pages, and I'm not sure how to accurately determine that beforehand. Again, I want to be able to jump around where inspiration hits. So if I want to do Pompeii, which was technically day like 4 of my trip, but start with that, like that be my very first spread to create, I don't want it to be the very first spread in the book. So I don't know how to accurately determine the mapping out of that, which makes me feel hesitant to start and use this method. Now we're moving on to my most recent binding method, which is the Japanese stab stitch, which you may recognize this journal from a flip through that I did. And I also did all the processes on my channel. I love this journal. I loved learning the method. It was really fun and also rewarding. I think visually it looks beautiful, and this definitely leans itself towards my single sheet friendly nature, which I think we can all agree is kind of essential for me at the moment. Again, I can just pick the 2 pages that I want to be next to each other. Like, that is a beautiful spread. The colors are cohesive, and that's because I was able to just make them as a single spread and then bind them later. Like, this opens, we've got the orange, it's all cohesive and consistent. It gives me the freedom to create spreads based on whatever is inspiring me in the moment. And I love that. However, it's not without its downsides. Look how bulky this is. As soon as you start adding layered ephemera or interactive elements, it becomes super duper gator mouth. And listen, I typically don't mind, but this is just for 1 week in New York without printed photos. There's no photos in here, except for one actually, which is at the very back, but that's not the point. For Europe, we're talking 5 weeks and copious amounts of photos. So this method for an entire trip, just to me personally, doesn't seem feasible. And now I have considered breaking the book up into a separate journal for each destination we visited, and that's definitely still on the table. But I'd still like to know if there is a better way to tackle this gator mouth, because I feel like it just doesn't look that bad on a shelf now, does it? But I don't know, I just feel like it's not necessarily what I want. Like, this thin of a spine with this chunk of a journal with like 5 different journals. It's not terrible, it really isn't, but I think there may be something better that we can come up together as a team. Speaking of sitting nicely, I have this 2019 Europe travel journal. There is a flip through of this on my channel if you're curious. As you can see here, despite all the inclusions, and there is a lot of inclusions, it lays mostly flat. And that is something I love. If we just do a quick comparison with the Japanese stab binding, it's almost the same height, despite this only being a week and this is almost 6 weeks actually in Europe. So they're the same height, but just vastly different appearances. This spine again is super thin whilst this is thick. And I don't know, I feel like this feels more substantial. And whilst binders, they really do accommodate what I need, which is full control over page order. I can add, remove, or arrange anytime I want, which fits my creative process. And it also allows the sheets to be handled separately, which is major tick, 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 tick. Everything that I like is there. However, there is some concerns. So this particular journal is held together by string. And whilst it looks lovely, it's super flimsy. Like, I don't like that at all. It just feels like it can fall apart at any point. And whilst I did originally intend to have like binder rings. It just got too big and it didn't accommodate it. I couldn't find any that would fit this. Again, I could potentially split it up into 2 or more if I need. However, I do also have pre-made binders. So this is my recipe one and an unused project life, which includes sleeves. Sleeves are something I haven't touched on, and whilst I do, I'm not opposed to incorporating them into the journal, I wouldn't want each page to be in a sleeve because I want to add pockets and interactive elements, and having them in sleeves won't allow for that. Right, so with binders, they still kind of tick everything that I want in terms of like the page order and doing them separately. However, do we think it will accommodate such a big project? And there's also the issue, of course, of hole punching. Like, what happens if the pages get too heavy? Will it cause tearing? I can always reinforce them, but is that something that I want to do? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. There's so many thoughts and considerations that are coming into my mind. So let's jump into my final considerations and thoughts, and hoping that you guys can help me out. So that's where I'm at, guys. I feel a little bit overwhelmed, but still very, very excited to start this project and take you guys along with me. As you can see, I've tested a few methods and ruled some out, and I still don't know which direction to go. That's why I would really love to hear from you. If you have any binding method ideas or approaches that you think that I should try, a hybrid of a sort, please share it in the comments. I will also leave a checklist of my wants and don't wants in the description box in case it sparks any ideas. Thank you so, so much for watching and being a part of this process. I genuinely feel so lucky to have such a creative and generous community to bounce ideas off, to share, to inspire. Thank you so, so much. I'll see you all in my next one. Bye-bye.